Hello, it's Tom, editor of the Popcorn Muncher, and welcome once again to our YouTube channel. Now, this week, I'd like you to indulge me in a little bit of a rant about one of my most hated terms in movie criticism at the moment, and that is the term elevated horror. There's been a lot of talk about that phrase this week because it's been frequently deployed with regards to Hereditary, which is this week's very buzzy new horror movie from the first-time writer-director Ari Aster. Elevated horror is a term that its advocates would suggest exists to define horror that has a more dramatic tone than you'd expect and a deeper thematic meaning than the standard jumps, jolts, and things that go bump in the night that they would claim form the bread and butter of the genre. In practice, though, what this term basically means is a horror movie that's good. There's something about the visceral audience reactions that power horror movies, and comedies also fall victim to this, that puts them into the ballpark of lowbrow culture. They are deemed by some particularly snotty critics as being somehow lesser when compared to the sort of weighty dramas that win Academy Awards. It's no coincidence that the presence of horror at the Oscars is rare and very seldom successful. Good dramatic horror is still horror. The genre is a huge, broad church. It's just that this particular broad church features an upturned crucifix and the dismembered bodies of the congregation. The avatars of the elevated horror notion are movies like The Babadook, It Follows, It Comes at Night, The Witch, and of course now Hereditary. The thing that these films all have in common is that their horror serves as an obvious allegory, whether it's for grief, teenage sexuality, or coming of age. But this is nothing new. All of the best horror is about something more. One of my favourite books about film is Carol Clover's Men, Women and Chainsaws. It's an insightful discussion of gender in horror that reads deep ideological meaning into some of the most traditionally low corners of horror, whether that's formulaic slasher movies or rape revenge tales. It does an enormous disservice to the Carpenters, Romeros and Cravens of the world to decide that horror only started to have a brain 5 years ago. There is definitely truth in the notion that we're in a golden age for the genre, with some genuine masterpieces coming through the ranks. But these aren't the first scary films to have approached horror with intelligence, elegance, and sophistication. As a horror fan, it's maddening to see the genre reduced to a selection of jump scares. But this is equally borne out by the way audiences respond to these movies. Those polled by CinemaScore gave The Witch a very low C- score, while the slow burn post-apocalypse horror of It Comes at Night got an even worse D grade. Hereditary, which has wowed the festival circuit and is being showered with critical acclaim calling it the next Exorcist, got a D+ score from audiences. Meanwhile, the very conventional Insidious The Last Key from earlier this year got quite a solid B-. Audiences punish thwarted expectations. If they are sold the scariest horror movie ever, they expect to jump, yelp, and scream for 90 minutes, clinging on to their romantic partners like a jacket caught in a car door, leaving satisfied after the credits roll and decidedly unaffected by what they've seen. When a film like Hereditary comes along, a 2-hour meditation on grief and guilt that doesn't have a single jump scare but does get its claws into you and leaves you thinking about it afterwards, they feel like they've been duped by a film like that. Even worse, though, is when filmmakers themselves play to this way of thinking. Ari Aster, though ultimately describing Hereditary as a horror movie, which it is, does tiptoe around the genre a little bit. He's admitted in a number of interviews that he described the film as a family tragedy that curdles into a nightmare when he was trying to sell it to financiers. And he's spoken about how the movie owes as much to melodrama as it does to horror. If even a horror filmmaker doesn't have the courage to admit that he's making a genre picture, what hope is there for critics and audiences? Horror is my favourite genre, and I love its diversity above all else. I love it when it's campy and ridiculous, I love it when it's gory and nasty, and I love it when it's intense, dramatic, and thematically powerful. All of these descriptors can and do apply to horror movies, and filmmakers should be proud to describe their work in this way. And then it's down to audiences and critics to ensure that the discussion about the films reflects the broad genre in which it sits. To paraphrase Max Wren in Videodrome, long live the new horror. But let me know what you think. Do you think that elevated horror or post-horror is a useful descriptor? Or do you think that horror movies like Hereditary are being done a disservice by this classification? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Make sure you leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and head over to thepopcornmuncher.com for more of our content. You can also look in the description below where I've put all of our social media links so you can keep up to date with everything that's going on the site. Thank you very much for watching.